You've lived your whole life asleep in your own story. It's time to wake up. The unseen within, the greatest journey is not across mountains or oceans, but inward, into the forgotten chambers of your own soul. We are born into a world that teaches us to look outward, to chase, to achieve, to gather, to become. From the first breath, our eyes are trained to seek meaning in the external, to measure our worth by what can be seen, touched, or applauded. We build identities from borrowed fragments, names, roles, titles, faces in the mirror that slowly harden into masks. But beyond all these layers, beyond the noise of survival, there exists a world within you more vast than any horizon you could ever reach. That is where the true pilgrimage begins, not in distance but in depth. The unseen within you is not silent. It has been speaking all along, through the whispers of intuition, the ache of longing, the quiet unrest that stirs when the world grows still. Yet most people never listen. They drown that voice beneath the static of obligation, distraction, and endless noise. They fear the quiet because it mirrors them back to themselves. But there comes a time when life itself begins to conspire to bring you home. The career that once defined you loses its thrill. The relationships that once filled you begin to feel hollow. The world outside starts to fade in color. This is not the end of meaning. It's the beginning of awakening. It's the soul reminding you that your story isn't out there. It's in here, waiting to be rediscovered. To walk inward is not easy. It means confronting what you've spent your life avoiding. The pain buried beneath your confidence, the grief you've disguised as strength, the emptiness behind the laughter. You must pass through the shadows, those unhealed corners of the psyche where forgotten memories sleep. And when you do, you begin to see that nothing inside you was ever evil or wrong. It was only exiled, misunderstood, unloved. You realize that the parts of you you've disowned were never meant to be erased. They were meant to be embraced, for they carry fragments of your wholeness. The inner journey strips you bare. It dismantles everything you thought was true about who you are. The more you descend, the less you recognize yourself, until even your reflection becomes a stranger. But that's the paradox. You must lose yourself to find yourself. You must walk into the unknown territory of your own being without a map, without control, without certainty. In that surrender, something extraordinary happens. The soul begins to rise. When you go inward deeply enough, you discover a silence that isn't empty. It's alive. It breathes with a wisdom beyond thought, beyond language. It's the place where intuition replaces logic, where truth is not reasoned but revealed. In that silence, you meet the part of you that has never been wounded, never been afraid, never been broken. The divine core. It watches every storm you've endured, every heartbreak you've carried with the patience of eternity. It knows that nothing real can be lost, and nothing lost was ever truly you. This inward path is not a retreat from the world, it's a reclamation of it. Once you begin to see through the lens of the soul, the world around you changes in texture. You start to see that every event, every relationship, every pain was never random. It was an invitation to remember. The people who triggered you were mirrors, reflecting the parts of you still asking to be healed. The failures that crushed you were thresholds demanding you to look deeper. Even your loneliness was sacred. It was the space through which your true self could whisper again. We think of the inner world as quiet, but it's anything but passive. It's a storm of creation, a living universe pulsing with archetypes, emotions, images, and dreams. Each one is a key to a deeper truth. The anger you suppress may hide your power. The sadness you avoid may hold your compassion. The fear you run from may be the doorway to courage. The unseen within is not a place of weakness. It's where your strength has been waiting all along, covered in dust, buried beneath years of forgetting. To travel inward is to enter a sacred dialogue with your own existence. Every silence becomes a teacher. Every breath becomes a reminder. You begin to realize that life was never about finding something new. It was about remembering what you already are. You peel back the layers of conditioning, the opinions of others, the voices of the world telling you who to be. And underneath all that noise, you find a stillness that feels like home. That stillness does not need to be achieved. It was always there, waiting for you to return. The inward journey is not linear. Some days you will feel like you've found the center of everything, glowing with clarity. Other days, you'll feel lost again, tangled in old fears and confusion. That's not failure, that's growth. The path within moves like waves, not straight lines. Each descent is followed by expansion, each surrender by renewal. It is the rhythm of transformation, the heartbeat of awakening. You begin to live differently when you travel inward. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop chasing validation because you no longer need the world to see you. You've seen yourself. The approval you once begged for becomes irrelevant, because the only gaze that matters now is the one that rises from within. You understand that real freedom is not the absence of pain, but the ability to hold pain without losing presence. You begin to walk through life not as a seeker, but as a knower, not as someone trying to become, but as someone remembering. The greatest journey is inward because it is endless. There are always deeper rooms, deeper truths, deeper stillness waiting to be explored. You could spend lifetimes wandering through your own soul and still never reach the edge of it. It is infinite because it is divine. And as you go deeper, the boundaries between you and the universe begin to dissolve. You start to sense that the same intelligence that moves the stars moves within your chest. The same light that births galaxies flickers behind your eyes. This is why the world's most sacred truths were never written in books or shouted from mountaintops. They were whispered in the quiet of the heart. Every great discovery, every spark of genius, every act of compassion has come from those who dared to listen to that whisper. It is not a voice of command, but of remembrance. It calls you not to escape life, but to inhabit it fully, to see that the divine was never somewhere else. It was hidden in the unseen within you all along. Ego is the mask. The person you call me is only a surface. An actor wearing a mask to survive the world, not the essence that gives it life. From the moment you began to speak, the world handed you an identity. It gave you a name, a story, a set of rules that defined what was right, what was wrong, what was acceptable to love, and what was forbidden to feel. You learned how to smile when you were sad, how to pretend when you were afraid, how to shape yourself into something the world could applaud. And slowly, without even noticing, you began to mistake the mask for the face beneath it. The mask became safer, more predictable, easier to control. But the more you wore it, the further you drifted from your essence, from the quiet pulse of truth that beats beneath the surface of who you think you are. The ego was never the enemy. It was born to protect you, to help you navigate a world that often demanded conformity over authenticity. It learned how to adapt, how to calculate, how to keep you alive in moments when showing your real self might have broken you. But the same mask that once saved you eventually becomes your cage. It begins to harden, shaping your perception, controlling your reactions, deciding what you can and cannot feel. You begin to live not as yourself, but as a character crafted by fear and expectation. Every word you speak is filtered through it. Every dream you chase is limited by it. Every relationship you enter is distorted by its need to maintain control. The ego thrives on comparison. It cannot exist without opposition. It needs to feel better than someone, smarter than someone, more deserving, more right, more loved. It divides the world into me and them. success and failure, light and shadow. It builds walls of judgment, fences of pride, and towers of illusion so high that you forget there was ever a sky beyond them. And the cruel irony is that the more the ego tries to protect you from pain, the more pain it creates. It isolates you not just from others, but from yourself. It whispers that you are incomplete, that you must prove your worth, that love must be earned, that peace must be fought for. It tells you that you are not enough until you become something more, something perfect, something acceptable. But there is a moment in every life when the mask begins to crack. Sometimes it happens slowly, through years of quiet dissatisfaction. Sometimes it shatters all at once, through heartbreak, failure, or loss. You look at the reflection in the mirror and realize that the person staring back is a stranger. You've been living a script written by someone else, repeating lines that no longer fit the truth that trembles beneath your ribs. The ego panics when this happens. It resists. It tries to glue the pieces back together, to convince you that without it you'll disappear. But deep down, you know that the one who watches the mask fall apart is not the mask. It's the witness behind it, the consciousness that has always been there, untouched and eternal. The ego fears silence because silence exposes it. In silence there is nothing for it to control, no narrative to uphold, no applause to chase. That is why you fill your days with distractions, with noise, with endless doing. Because stillness makes you feel like you are disappearing. But that disappearance is not death, it's awakening. It's the dissolving of the false self so the real one can finally breathe. When you stop identifying with your roles, your titles, your thoughts, you begin to experience the vastness of being. You realize that you are not the waves of thought crashing through your mind. You are the ocean that holds them. The mask of ego is built from memory. It collects every insult, every praise, every failure, every victory, and weaves them into a story called It uses the past to predict the future, to maintain control over the present. But the soul doesn't live in memory, it lives in presence. The soul doesn't compare, it simply is. The moment you step into the now, the ego begins to lose its grip. It feeds on time, on yesterday's wounds and tomorrow's fears. When you bring your awareness fully into this moment, you start to see through the illusion of separateness. You begin to notice that the same consciousness that lives in you breathes through everything around you. The trees, the wind, the stranger passing by. Ego loves identity because identity gives it form. It says, I am this profession, this belief, this nationality, this trauma. It clings to labels because without them, it would dissolve into nothingness. But that nothingness is not emptiness, it is freedom. The moment you stop identifying with what you think you are, you open the door to what you truly are. The awareness that watches, the presence that feels, the stillness beneath every movement, that is your real nature. It cannot be destroyed, cannot be improved, cannot be compared. It simply exists, radiant and untouched, behind every mask you've ever worn. The ego speaks the language of fear, but the soul speaks the language of truth. Fear says, protect yourself. Truth says, reveal yourself. Fear says, you are not enough. Truth says, you have always been enough. The ego builds walls, truth opens windows. When you begin to live from the essence instead of the mask, you stop needing to perform. You stop chasing approval because authenticity becomes your peace. You start to act not from obligation but from alignment. Your relationships deepen, your words soften, your life feels lighter. Not because the world has changed, but because your perception has. The ego believes awakening is a threat. It thinks that if the mask falls, you will cease to exist. But awakening doesn't destroy the ego, it repositions it. The mask becomes transparent, the The actor becomes aware of the stage, and life becomes a play again, not a battlefield. You no longer fight your ego, you see it for what it is, a useful tool, a necessary illusion that allows the infinite to experience itself in form. You wear it when you must, but you no longer confuse it with your face. You begin to live as both. The timeless and the temporary, the ocean and the wave, the actor and the awareness that watches the play unfold. When you begin to see through the mask, the grip of the ego softens. The constant need to prove, to win, to be right begins to dissolve. You start to laugh at the absurdity of it all, the drama, the comparison, the endless chase for significance. You realize that peace was never lost, it was only hidden behind layers of pretending. And as those layers fall, what remains is not a smaller version of you, but a truer one, the essence that gives life to the mask, the witness behind every role you've ever played, the consciousness that has always been watching, quietly waiting for you to remember who you really are. The shadow holds light. What you reject, what you hide, what you fear in yourself, those are not your enemies. They are unintegrated fragments of your power waiting to return home. Every human carries a hidden side, a silent underworld that exists beneath the image we show to others. It is made of everything we were taught to suppress. Everything we learned was too much, too ugly, too wrong to be loved. We bury it under smiles, under ambition, under layers of performance so deep that even we forget it's there. But it never disappears. The shadow waits. It waits in your anger, your jealousy, your shame, your guilt. It waits in the places you avoid, the conversations you escape, the people who trigger you. It hides not to harm you, but to remind you that healing can never come from rejection. It can only come from integration. From childhood, you are taught that to be accepted, you must be good. To be loved, you must be polite, obedient, successful. So you begin dividing yourself. You hide your rage, your curiosity, your wildness, your sadness. You push them into the darkness and lock the door, thinking that control equals safety. But what you repress does not die. It grows roots in the unconscious, shaping your choices, your reactions, your fears. The people you despise often mirror the parts of yourself you cannot face. The emotions you condemn in others are the ones you have condemned in yourself. The world becomes your reflection, endlessly showing you what you have refused to see. The shadow reveals itself through contrast. When you find yourself judging someone, look deeper. The intensity of that judgment is often the echo of something unresolved within. You are not angry because they are wrong. You are angry because they are showing you a truth you've denied. The mind resists this idea. It wants to remain pure, righteous, in control. But real growth is not about purity. It's about wholeness. It's about holding every aspect of your being, the saint and the sinner, the lover and the destroyer, and realizing they are all facets of the same diamond. The shadow is not darkness, it is light wrapped in fear. It holds the creative fire that was suppressed when someone told you your dreams were unrealistic. It holds the sensual energy you repressed when you were shamed for desiring too much. It holds the voice you silenced when the world told you to stay quiet. Every rejection becomes a prison, and every prison holds the key to a deeper truth. When you dare to open those doors, when you look directly into what you've been running from, you begin to reclaim the fragments of your soul that have been exiled for too long. Meeting the shadow is not an intellectual exercise. It's an emotional confrontation. It's the trembling in your chest when an old wound resurfaces, the fire in your throat when unspoken words beg to be released. It's standing in front of your pain without trying to fix it, without judging it, without pretending to rise above it. It's saying to yourself, I see you. I will not run anymore. That moment of seeing is sacred. It's the beginning of alchemy. The transformation of fear into understanding, of shame into acceptance, of darkness into light. When you embrace the shadow, you begin to see that every emotion has intelligence. Anger is not evil, it's the energy of violated boundaries asking to be restored. Envy is not sin. It's the soul's signal that you have desires you've been denying. Sadness is not weakness. It's the heart's way of cleansing itself so love can flow again. Even guilt, when seen clearly, is not punishment but a compass pointing you back to integrity. Nothing in you is random, nothing is wrong. Everything has a purpose when held in awareness. But awareness takes courage. The ego resists it because the ego's survival depends on maintaining the illusion of control. It fears the shadow because it cannot dominate what it does not understand. Yet the soul knows the truth. The parts you reject hold the keys to your evolution. Every time you confront your shadow, you expand your capacity to hold life. You become less reactive, more compassionate, more whole. You stop projecting your pain onto others because you've learned to meet it within yourself. The people who once triggered you become your teachers. The moments that once broke you become your mirrors. This process is not glamorous. It's raw, messy, uncomfortable. The mind will rebel. The heart will ache. But if you stay, if you breathe through the discomfort, you'll notice something extraordinary happening. The energy that once controlled you begins to transform. The rage becomes clarity. The fear becomes strength. The shame becomes empathy. What once felt like poison becomes medicine. You realize that the shadow was never your enemy. It was your guide back to wholeness. The light that most people chase through external validation already exists within them, buried under layers of self-rejection. True illumination doesn't come from transcending your darkness, but from descending into it with awareness. The light that rises from that descent is different. It's steady, grounded, unshakable. It doesn't depend on the approval of others, nor does it vanish in the face of pain. It's born from intimacy with yourself. It's the light that knows the night. When you stop rejecting parts of yourself, something miraculous happens. You stop rejecting life. You begin to see beauty even in the broken, grace even in the grief, purpose even in the suffering. You start to understand that light and shadow are not opposites but partners in creation. There is no sunrise without night, no rebirth without decay, no awakening without descent. Every time you integrate a shadow, you become more real, more alive, more human. The walls between good and bad crumble, and in their place rises the quiet knowing that everything belongs. The shadow teaches humility. It reminds you that no matter how enlightened you believe you are, there are always deeper layers to uncover, deeper truths to face. It strips away arrogance and replaces it with compassion. When you recognize your own darkness, you stop condemning others for theirs. You begin to see that we are all fragments of the same light, all carrying our own wounds, all searching for the same home. The moment you embrace your shadow, you unconsciously give others permission to embrace theirs. Healing ripples outward, silently, invisibly, changing everything it touches. Your greatest potential often hides behind your deepest fear. The qualities you most admire in others are often the same ones you've buried within yourself. The passion you envy, the freedom you crave, the authenticity you idolize. They all live inside you, waiting for you to stop pretending you don't deserve them. The shadow holds them hostage until you're ready to face the pain that blocked them. But once you do, once you let the light of awareness flood the darkness, the fragments return. The energy that was once divided begins to merge, and the soul starts to remember its original wholeness. Every shadow is an invitation to return, not to perfection, but to presence, not to an idealized version of yourself, but to the truth of what you are, light woven with darkness, divinity wearing humanity, infinite consciousness experiencing itself through limitation. And in that return, you begin to see that what you feared most was never meant to destroy you. It was meant to wake you up to the power, the beauty, and the completeness that have been waiting in the depths of your own being. Dreams are the soul's language. Every dream, every emotion, every quiet whisper in your mind is the universe trying to remind you who you truly are. We live in a world obsessed with logic, where only what can be measured is considered real, where the unseen is dismissed as imagination. Yet, within the stillness of night, when the mind softens its grip and the ego dissolves into silence, another language begins to speak. A language older than words, older than thought. It speaks through symbols, emotions, images, and sensations that seem to rise from nowhere. It is the language of the soul, whispering truths that the waking mind has forgotten. Dreams are not illusions, they are conversations between the conscious and the eternal. They are messages written in the code of metaphor, a bridge between the physical and the spiritual, the finite and the infinite. When you dream, your soul is speaking to you in its native tongue, weaving stories that reveal what your waking self cannot yet bear to see. Some dreams come as visions of light, filling you with peace and purpose. Others come as shadows, disturbing, chaotic, confusing. But even the darkest dream carries meaning. The nightmare that wakes you trembling is not punishment, it is communication. It's the unhealed part of you asking to be seen. The rational mind tries to analyze dreams as random patterns of thought, but the soul knows better. The soul does not speak in logic. It speaks in poetry. When you see yourself falling, you are not dreaming of descent, you are dreaming of surrender. When you are lost in a maze, it's not confusion. It's your inner guidance showing you where your truth has become entangled. When you dream of flying, it's not fantasy. It's the memory of your infinite nature reminding you that freedom is your birthright. Each dream, no matter how small or strange, carries a piece of your wholeness, a spark of the divine intelligence that lives within you. In the silence of night, your defenses drop. The masks you wear fall away. You are no longer the worker, the parent, the friend, the one who must hold everything together. You become pure consciousness again, unrestricted by time or form. The soul takes that moment to speak, to send you symbols from beyond the veil of reason. These symbols are not meant to be solved like puzzles, they are meant to be felt. They bypass logic and go straight to intuition, awakening forgotten truths within you. The dream does not ask for analysis, it asks for attention. It asks you to listen with the same stillness that it was born from. Every dream is a mirror. It reflects not only your fears and desires, but also the hidden wisdom guiding your path. The recurring dream you've had for years is not coincidence. It's persistence. It's a message that will not stop knocking until you open the door. The stranger in your dream might be the unacknowledged part of yourself. The endless staircase may represent the layers of your consciousness you're still climbing. The house you walk through, with its rooms and corridors, is your inner architecture, the structure of your psyche revealing itself. The dream is not separate from you. It is you, speaking in symbols because words are too small to hold the truth of your being. Emotions, too, are part of this sacred language. They are dreams that awaken in daylight. Each feeling is a messenger carrying insight from the depths of your soul. The sadness you avoid is your heart's way of asking for connection. The joy that rushes through you without reason is the universe flowing freely through your open self. The anger you suppress is the energy of transformation trapped beneath unspoken truth. When you stop labeling emotions as good or bad and start treating them as teachers, they begin to reveal their meaning. The soul does not separate joy from pain. It uses both as vocabulary to communicate its evolution. Sometimes the soul speaks softly through intuition, a quiet knowing that arises without proof. A nudge to take a different path, a whisper to call someone, a pull toward a dream that feels irrational but irresistible. Most people ignore this voice because it doesn't shout. It does not argue or explain. It simply waits for you to become quiet enough to hear it. And yet, this intuition is the same force that moves galaxies, that breathes life into every living thing. When you follow it, you begin to move in rhythm with the universe itself. Life stops being something you control and becomes something you dance with. The waking world and the dream world are not separate. They are threads of the same fabric. The more you listen to your dreams, the more your waking life begins to change. You start to see synchronicities, patterns repeating, numbers appearing, people arriving at the exact moment you need them. These are waking dreams, signs that the universe is responding to your awareness. Once you begin to understand the language of the soul, you realize that everything around you speaks in it. The wind, the stars, the eyes of strangers, the silence between words. Dreams often bring you the truths you are not ready to admit to yourself. They expose your illusions gently, wrapping them in imagery so that you can face them without resistance. You may dream of being chased, not because something is hunting you, but because something within you is begging to be acknowledged. You may dream of losing something precious, not as punishment, but as preparation for surrender. Every image, every feeling, every whisper is designed not to confuse but to awaken. The dream world is the rehearsal space for the soul's evolution, where lessons are played out in symbols before they manifest in the physical realm. To live without listening to your dreams is to live with only half of your consciousness awake. You cannot fully know yourself if you ignore the language of your depths. The rational mind seeks certainty, the soul seeks meaning. The rational mind builds walls of logic, the soul paints symbols across them, asking you to look beyond the obvious. When you learn to translate this language, when you start to write down your dreams, to sit with them in stillness instead of rushing to interpret, something shifts. You begin to understand that your soul has never stopped speaking. It was only you who stopped listening. And when you begin to listen again, life starts to feel different. Every coincidence becomes significant, every emotion becomes sacred, every dream becomes a doorway. You start to live in dialogue with existence itself. You begin to trust that the same intelligence that sends you visions at night also guides you during the day. You realize that your purpose is not something to be found, but something to be remembered, and that the map to it has always been written in the language of your own soul, wholeness over perfection. You are not meant to be flawless. You are meant to be whole, to embrace both your darkness and your light as sacred halves of the same divine truth. Perfection is the illusion that has kept humanity in chains for centuries. It promises freedom through control, love through achievement, peace through denial. But perfection is a mirage. It recedes the closer you get to it, forever demanding more, forever whispering that who you are right now is not enough. Wholeness is different. Wholeness does not ask you to rise above your flaws. It asks you to descend into them, to hold them, to understand them. It does not divide you into worthy and unworthy parts. It gathers everything you are and declares all of it sacred. We are born into a world that worships perfection. From childhood, we learn to hide the messy parts, to swallow our tears, to silence our anger, to bury our confusion. We are taught that to be loved we must be good, and to be good we must be pure, polished, controlled. But every attempt to perfect yourself is an act of rejection against the truth of your humanity. The cracks you try to hide are not mistakes. They are openings through which the light enters. The chaos you fear within you is not something to be fixed. It is life itself, raw, untamed, and holy. Wholeness begins when you stop running from yourself. It begins when you look at the parts you've buried. The jealousy, the fear, the laziness, the selfishness. And instead of condemning them, you ask what they came to teach you. You start to see that even your flaws carry wisdom. Your impatience shows where your spirit longs for change. Your sadness reveals what you value most. Your mistakes uncover where love has not yet reached. When you stop dividing your being into right and wrong, you start to feel the quiet power that lives beneath duality, the understanding that everything in you belongs. Perfection demands war with the self. It makes you believe that peace will come only when you've conquered your weaknesses, when you've silenced your pain, when you've eliminated every imperfection. But that war never ends, because you cannot defeat what you are. The more you fight your shadow, the stronger it grows. The more you reject your humanity, the more disconnected you become from your divinity. Wholeness, however, asks for surrender. It invites you to stop striving and start seeing. It whispers that nothing needs to be erased, everything needs to be integrated. It shows you that your shadow and your light were never enemies. They were partners in your evolution. To be whole is to stand in the center of your own paradox. You can be strong and afraid, confident and uncertain, peaceful and restless, all at once. You can hold grief and gratitude in the same breath. You can fall apart and still be complete. Wholeness is not the absence of contradiction. It's the harmony that arises when you stop trying to force opposites to cancel each other out. It's the moment you realize that your brokenness does not make you less divine. It makes you real. The pursuit of perfection disconnects you from the present moment. It keeps you living in the future, chasing a version of yourself that doesn't exist. Wholeness lives only in now. It doesn't ask you to become something else. It asks you to be here as you are. When you stop judging yourself through the lens of perfection, you begin to experience life directly, without filters. You start to feel the full range of your emotions without labeling them as good or bad. You allow sadness to move through you like rain instead of trying to stop it. You let joy overflow without guilt. You trust that every feeling has a place, every moment has meaning. Wholeness also transforms how you see others. When you no longer demand perfection from yourself, you stop demanding it from the world. You begin to recognize the shared humanity in everyone. The same struggle, the same longing, the same divine spark buried beneath different masks. You see that the flaws in others are reflections of your own, and instead of judgment, compassion arises. You stop needing people to fit your expectations, because you understand that every soul is learning to balance its own darkness and light. The mind that seeks perfection lives in constant fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being seen. But the heart that seeks wholeness is fearless, because it no longer hides. It knows that to be fully alive is to be fully human, and to be fully human is to embrace imperfection as part of the divine design. The heart does not separate beauty from pain. It sees them as two expressions of the same truth. It knows that the flower does not resist the dirt. It grows from it. In the silence of awareness, you can feel the tug between perfection and wholeness. Perfection whispers, "Fix yourself." Wholeness whispers, "Meet yourself." One pulls you outward, the other draws you inward. One promises validation, the other offers freedom. The moment you choose to meet yourself instead of fix yourself, the tension inside begins to soften. The pieces you thought were broken start to fit together again. Not because they've been repaired, but because they were never truly separate. Wholeness does not make life easier, it makes it truer. It allows you to experience the full texture of existence. The joy and the sorrow, the clarity and the confusion, the love and the loss, without resistance. You start to see beauty in impermanence, strength in vulnerability, wisdom in mistakes. You begin to understand that growth is not a straight line upward, but a spiral inward, each cycle bringing you closer to your center. You stop chasing enlightenment as escape and start embodying it as integration. Perfection is sterile, wholeness is alive. Perfection seeks symmetry, wholeness celebrates contrast. Perfection fears the fall, wholeness learns to dance in the descent. When you stop polishing your soul and start embracing its texture, you find a peace that perfection could never offer. It's the peace of knowing that you can hold all that you are. The broken and the brilliant, the sinner and the saint, and still be worthy of love. The world does not need perfect people. It needs whole ones, people who can sit with discomfort without collapsing, who can hold contradiction without judgment, who can love others without needing them to change. Wholeness ripples outward. It creates safety, authenticity, and connection wherever it goes. When you are whole, you become a mirror that shows others it's safe to be human. To live in wholeness is to accept that you are a mosaic of every experience you've ever had. Some pieces are jagged, others smooth. Some shine, others are dark. Together they form the image of your soul. When you try to cut away the parts you dislike, you destroy the picture. When you allow them all to exist, you begin to see the divine pattern emerging. The intricate, imperfect, sacred art that is you. Wholeness over perfection is the shift from striving to surrender, from judgment to love, from fragmentation to unity. It is the realization that the divine does not dwell only in light. It also breathes through the shadows. It is the understanding that every wound holds wisdom, every flaw hides beauty, every contradiction points toward truth. To be whole is to remember that you were never broken. You were simply learning to hold all of yourself in the arms of acceptance. The self is the divine core. Beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath every illusion of identity, there is something eternal, radiant, and unbreakable. That is who you've always been. Long before you learned your name, before the world told you who you were supposed to be, before pain carved its lessons into your heart, there was a presence within you, silent, vast, infinite. It does not age, it does not fear, it does not break. It has been watching every moment of your life, untouched by your victories, unshaken by your failures. That presence is your true self, the divine core that exists beyond all stories. The tragedy of human existence is that we forget this. We grow up thinking we are the mask, the collection of memories, desires, opinions, and labels that form our identity. We spend our lives trying to perfect that mask, polish it, defend it, prove it. We chase success to make it feel worthy, relationships to make it feel loved, possessions to make it feel real. But the mask is never satisfied, because it was never meant to be. It is a temporary tool, a role you play in the grand theater of existence. The actor beneath it, the consciousness that gives it life, is what you truly are. This self cannot be defined. It is not your thoughts, though it uses thoughts to express. It is not your emotions, though it feels them deeply. It is not your body, though it animates every breath and heartbeat. It is the awareness behind all these things, the witness of your life's unfolding. When you are angry, it watches. When you are joyful, it watches. When you sleep, it remains awake in silence. It has been with you through every transformation, every heartbreak, every rebirth. While the world around you changes, while faces come and go, while your mind evolves and your beliefs dissolve, the self remains, the still point in the turning world. Every suffering you have ever known began the moment you forgot this truth. The moment you mistook your reflection for your reality. The moment you believed the noise of the mind to be your voice. You were cast into illusion. You began to fear death because you thought you were the body. You began to chase validation because you thought you were the ego. You began to compare, compete and cling, because you thought your worth depended on things outside of you. Yet none of these were ever truly you. They were ripples on the surface of a vast ocean, fleeting movements above a depth that remains eternally calm. To awaken to the self is not to become something new. It is to remember what you never lost. It is to peel away every layer of illusion that has covered your essence. It is the process of unlearning everything the world taught you about who you are. Each role, parent, lover, achiever, victim, savior, is just a wave. The ocean beneath is your truth. The moment you stop identifying with the wave, you fall back into the depth of the sea, and there you find peace that no success can create and no failure can destroy. The mind fears this realization because it lives through separation. It needs contrast, good and bad, me and you, gain and loss, to define itself. The self, however, exists beyond duality. It simply is. It holds both light and shadow, joy and pain, without judgment. In the space of the self, opposites cease to fight. They become aspects of one eternal reality. This is why the great mystics spoke not of becoming perfect, but of becoming whole. When you rest in the self, the battle within ends. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer chase meaning. You become meaning itself. The journey back to the self often begins with loss. When the identities you've built start to crumble, when the life you thought you controlled begins to fall apart, when the things that once defined you no longer bring fulfillment. That is not failure, it is awakening. The collapse of illusion is not destruction, it is revelation. What remains after the storm is what is real. You begin to notice a stillness within you that does not break no matter what happens outside. You start to hear a quiet whisper beneath the noise, saying, "I am still here." That whisper is the voice of the self, calling you home. Every spiritual practice, every act of reflection, every moment of deep silence is an invitation to remember. Meditation is not about escaping the mind. It is about seeing that you are not the mind. Forgiveness is not about condoning others. It is about freeing yourself from the chains of ego that keep you separate. Compassion arises naturally when you see that the same self lives within all beings. When you look into another's eyes and feel something timeless staring back, you glimpse the truth: there is only one self, wearing countless faces. The divine core within you is not a metaphor. It is a reality more solid than the ground you stand on. It is the consciousness through which you perceive the universe, the sacred light from which all things arise and to which all things return. Even science, in its own language, echoes this truth. The particles that make up your body are born from the same stars that birthed galaxies. You are not in the universe, you are the universe, experiencing itself as human for a brief moment in eternity. The self is that infinite awareness choosing to dance as you. When you live from this awareness, everything changes. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop seeking validation because you no longer feel separate from the source of all love. You begin to act not from fear, but from truth. The choices you make no longer come from the need to fill a void. They arise from the overflowing abundance of being itself. You become still even in chaos, kind even in conflict, wise even in uncertainty. You move through the world like a flame that cannot be extinguished, because you know the fire is eternal. And yet, awakening to the self does not mean abandoning the human experience. It means embodying it fully. Without attachment, you can still play your roles. You can love, build, create, and grieve. But now you do it with awareness. You know that behind every role, every joy, every pain, you remain untouched. You can fall in love deeply without fear of loss, because love itself is the expression of your true nature. You can face suffering without despair, because you know that what suffers is not who you are. You can walk through darkness without losing your light, because your light was never born. It cannot die. When the layers of illusion finally dissolve, you see life as it is, boundless, interconnected, divine. You realize that the same presence that breathes through you breathes through the trees, the rivers, the stars. You feel the pulse of the cosmos in your veins. The self is not somewhere far away waiting to be found. It is here, in this breath, in this moment, in this awareness, reading these words. It was never hidden. It was simply forgotten beneath the noise of the mind, the stories of the past, the illusions of control. The return to your divine core is the greatest homecoming you will ever know. It is the awakening from the dream of separateness into the reality of unity. It is the remembrance that beneath every name, every wound, every mask, you have always been whole, luminous, and infinite. The self does not need to be created or improved. It only needs to be seen. When you see it, you know that you were never lost. You were always the light looking for itself through the eyes of time.